A wealthy rancher saw a Apache widow beaten each day by the town until he took her as his bride. The sun had barely risen over the rolling hills when Elias Morgan guided his horse along the dusty trail toward the small town near his ranch. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and dry earth, and the soft rustle of leaves whispered in the morning breeze. Elias was a tall man with broad shoulders and strong hands shaped by years of ranch work, but there was a calmness to him that few could match. His face, weathered by sun and wind, held a quiet wisdom, and his eyes, sharp and thoughtful, missed nothing. He had been away for weeks on business, ensuring his cattle trade and supplies ran smoothly, and while the town was small and often quiet, it was a place of routine he understood well. As he rode closer to the town, the distant sound of raised voices reached his ears. At first, he thought it was simply the clamor of merchants and customers preparing for the day, but as he drew nearer, a more troubling scene came into view. In the center of the town's dirt square stood a young woman, alone and trembling, while a small group of townspeople encircled her. Their voices were loud, sharp, and mocking, and Elias could see the fear in her eyes. Though she stood tall, there was no hiding the pain etched into her posture. The woman's name was Nokomis. She was known in the town as the Apache widow, a gentle soul whose quiet ways had always kept her apart from the bustling townsfolk. Her husband had died several years before, leaving her alone in a world that often showed little kindness to someone like her. Despite the hardship she had endured, she carried herself with dignity, her dark eyes reflecting a depth of strength that could not easily be broken. Yet today, even her resilience seemed tested to its limits. Elias's horse slowed as he drew closer, instinctively sensing the tension in the air. He saw one man step forward, pointing a finger at her as he shouted something Elias could not fully make out from this distance. The other townspeople laughed, their voices sharp and cruel, as if mocking her very existence. She did not respond, her eyes lowered, and her hands clenched at her sides. Elias felt a tight knot of anger form in his chest. The town had always been rough, and people often judged those who were different, but seeing someone treated with such disregard for their humanity stirred something deep inside him. Elias dismounted, leaving the horse to nibble at the sparse grass by the edge of the trail. He walked forward slowly, his boots crunching against the dry soil. He did not want to startle anyone or provoke unnecessary conflict, but he needed to see for himself what was happening. The townspeople did not seem to notice him at first, their attention fixed entirely on Nokomis. "She hasn't done anything wrong," Elias called out, his voice calm but firm. The crowd turned toward him, surprised to see a man of his presence and reputation standing in the square. Whispers ran through the group. Elias Morgan, the wealthy rancher, had arrived. One man, bolder than the rest, scowled. "And what business is it of yours, Morgan?" he demanded. "She doesn't belong here." Elias's eyes narrowed. "She belongs wherever she wants to be. That is the law of this land and the law of decency," he said, his voice steady. "No one has the right to humiliate her like this." The man hesitated, sensing the authority Elias carried. Yet the crowd murmured, uncomfortable but unwilling to act against the social norms they had long enforced. Elias looked at Nokomis, and she raised her eyes for the first time, meeting his gaze. There was a flicker of relief and perhaps curiosity in her expression. She had lived in fear of judgment all her life, and the sight of someone stepping forward for her, someone of influence, sparked a cautious hope. Elias stepped closer to her, his presence calm but commanding. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly, so that only she could hear. His words carried concern, but also a quiet strength that suggested protection. Nokomis nodded slightly, though the trembling of her hands betrayed her anxiety. The townspeople, sensing the tension, began to disperse slowly. They muttered under their breaths, glaring at Elias but unwilling to challenge him directly. He stayed where he was, making sure the woman was not left alone again. Once the crowd had thinned and the square had emptied, he turned fully to Nokomis. "Come with me," he said gently. "It's not safe to remain here like this." Nokomis hesitated, glancing at the town behind her. She had lived with suspicion and fear for so long that the idea of accepting help felt strange. Yet there was something about Elias, his calm manner, the honesty in his eyes, that felt different from the others. She nodded slowly, and together they walked toward his ranch, the morning sun rising higher in the sky, casting long shadows across the trail. As they rode toward the ranch, Elias tried to make small talk, hoping to ease her nerves. "What's your name?" he asked. "Nokomis," she replied softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's a strong name," Elias said, smiling faintly. "You have nothing to fear from me." For the first time in many days, Nokomis allowed herself a small measure of comfort. She rode beside him in silence, listening to the gentle sound of the horses' hooves against the dirt. The ranch was a place of wide open spaces, where the air was clean and the land stretched endlessly into hills and valleys. There was a stark contrast to the narrow, judgmental streets of the town. When they arrived, Elias led her inside the main house, a large structure built of stone and timber with rooms that were simple but well kept. He offered her a warm drink and a seat by the window, where the sunlight streamed in, bathing the room in a gentle glow. "You can stay here as long as you need," Elias said. "No one will harm you on this land." Nokomis looked around the room, taking in the comfort and security it offered. It was unfamiliar, but for the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of safety. She realized that Elias's intentions were genuine. He was not offering pity, but respect. Days passed, and Elias continued to ensure that Nokomis had everything she needed. He brought her food, warm blankets, and simple comforts, but more importantly, he gave her respect and kindness, something she had rarely experienced in the town. She began to open up slowly, sharing fragments of her past and the hardships she had endured. Elias listened without judgment, offering understanding and patience. He also took careful note of the subtle strength she possessed. Despite the cruel treatment from others, she carried herself with dignity, her eyes reflecting a quiet resilience. Elias admired her courage and intelligence, recognizing that her spirit was unbroken even after all she had suffered. In the evenings, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, they would sit together by the fire. They did not speak much at first, but the silence was comfortable, filled with mutual respect. Gradually, small conversations grew into laughter and shared stories, forming a bond that neither had expected. Elias could not ignore the anger and sadness that still lingered in Nokomis. He knew that the town's prejudice would not vanish overnight, and that her past pain would take time to heal. Yet he was determined to protect her and to show her that the world could offer kindness, compassion, and respect. And for Nokomis, each day spent on the ranch brought a new sense of hope, a hope that perhaps life could be more than fear and suffering. As night fell over the ranch, Elias looked out across the fields, thinking about the town and its narrow-mindedness. He understood that protecting Nokomis would not be simple, and that his actions would likely draw attention and judgment. But for the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of purpose beyond his own life and work. He had found someone worth standing up for, someone whose courage and spirit deserved recognition and care. And Nokomis, lying in the small guest room Elias had prepared for her, felt a strange but welcome warmth. For the first time in many years, She allowed herself to believe that safety, respect, and perhaps even happiness were not impossible. The day had begun with cruelty and fear, but it ended with the faint, promising glow of hope, a hope that would slowly, day by day, grow into something stronger, changing both their lives in ways neither could yet imagine. Days turned into weeks, and the quiet life at the ranch began to bring a sense of peace that Nokomis had not felt in a long time. The mornings were filled with the gentle sounds of animals and the soft rustling of leaves. Birds sang in the tall pine trees, and the air carried the faint scent of wildflowers and fresh earth. It was a life far removed from the narrow streets of the town, where judgment and cruelty had been constant companions. Elias Morgan continued his daily routines, tending to the cattle, checking fences, and making sure the ranch ran smoothly. Yet he always made time to check on Nokomis. Some mornings he brought her fresh eggs or milk from the farm. Other days he would guide her along the trails surrounding the ranch, pointing out the tracks of animals or showing her where wild berries grew. It was not just an act of kindness, but also a way of slowly earning her trust. Nokomis had begun to adapt to the rhythm of life at the ranch. She learned how to gather herbs, feed the chickens, and care for the garden. Elias was patient with her, never rushing her, and she appreciated the freedom and respect he offered. There was no mockery here, no judgment, only understanding and quiet guidance. Yet, despite the calm, Nokomis could not completely forget the cruelty of the town. Every sound of a distant voice or the sight of travelers passing along the trail reminded her that the outside world was not always kind. One afternoon, while Elias repaired a fence at the edge of the pasture, Nokomis sat nearby, weaving reeds into baskets. The soft clatter of the tools and the occasional call of the cattle filled the space around them. Elias glanced at her, noticing the way her hands moved deftly, turning simple reeds into something useful and beautiful. "You have a gift," he said quietly, not wanting to disturb her concentration. Nokomis looked up, meeting his gaze. "It is not much," she replied softly. "It is more than you realize," Elias said. "You take simple things and turn them into something meaningful. That is a rare skill." She allowed herself a small smile, a gesture she rarely offered anyone. The praise was not from pity, but from genuine recognition, and it warmed her in a way she had long forgotten. As the days passed, their interactions became more natural. They shared stories of their pasts, though carefully, and in those stories, they began to see the depth of each other's character. Elias spoke of his childhood on the ranch, of lessons learned from his father about honesty, hard work, and respect. Nokomis, in turn, spoke of her life before the tragedy of losing her husband, of the love she had known and the hardship she had faced. Each story built a bridge between them, a connection that grew steadily stronger. But the peace of the ranch could not completely shield them from the outside world. One morning, a group of townspeople rode near the edge of Elias's property, curious about the woman who had suddenly disappeared from their square. Elias noticed them from a distance and understood their intentions. He had no wish for confrontation, but he also knew he could not allow anyone to threaten Nokomis. He approached the group calmly, raising a hand in greeting. "Good morning," he said. "I hope you are well, but you are on private land? I must ask you to leave." The men exchanged glances, unsure how to respond. They had always seen Elias as a man of wealth and influence, someone to be respected, or at least feared. Yet their pride and perhaps lingering prejudice made them reluctant to back down completely. "We were only passing by," one of the men said, his tone hesitant. "We did not mean any harm." Elias's voice was steady but firm. "Regardless of your intentions, this land is private. You may pass by the road, but you must not come closer." The men muttered among themselves and slowly moved along, their curiosity satisfied, but their confidence shaken. Elias turned back toward Nokomis, who had been watching from the porch. She felt a mixture of relief and pride. Elias had stood up not only for her safety, but also for her dignity. It was a feeling she had never truly known before, a sense that someone would face the world to protect her without demanding anything in return. Days later, Elias introduced Nokomis to the ranch's daily routines in a more active way. They work side by side, fixing fences, gathering firewood, and feeding the animals. There was a rhythm to the labor that was satisfying, each task completed with care and patience. Nokomis found joy in the small successes, and Elias often praised her efforts. "You are learning quickly," he said one afternoon as she tightened a fence post. "I could not have done this without your help." Nokomis felt a sense of accomplishment she had rarely experienced. It was more than physical labor. It was recognition, respect, and a feeling of belonging. She began to understand that Elias did not see her as weak or inferior, but as a capable and strong individual. Their friendship grew alongside this work. Evenings were filled with quiet conversations by the fire, discussing everything from the stars overhead to the small wonders of the ranch. Nokomis learned about the constellations, the behavior of animals, and the ways Elias had built the ranch over the years. In return, she shared her knowledge of plants, the land, and survival skills she had learned from her own people. Together, they discovered that their skills complemented one another, creating a partnership of mutual respect and admiration. Yet despite the comfort of the ranch, Nokomis still feared the town. She knew that many of the townspeople did not understand her ways or her culture, and some still harbored resentment for the past. She wondered what would happen if she returned, if she had to face their judgment again. Elias noticed her unease one evening and spoke gently. "You do not need to face them now," he said. "You have a place here where you are safe, where you are respected. We can take things slowly, and when the time comes, you will be ready." Her eyes filled with gratitude. Elias's words were not empty promises. They were reassurance grounded in his actions. He had shown her day after day that kindness, patience, and respect were not just words. They were choices he made every day. Over time, Nokomis began to let her guard down more and more. She laughed when Elias made light jokes about the stubbornness of the cattle, and she smiled when he praised her work in the garden. There were moments of joy that she had almost forgotten, simple pleasures that now filled her days with light. The bond between them grew quietly, like the slow unfolding of a flower. It was not sudden or forced, but natural, built on trust, shared experiences, and mutual respect. Elias admired her wisdom, her courage, and her gentle strength. Nokomis admired his fairness, his patience, and the quiet confidence he carried without arrogance. One afternoon, as they sat beneath a large oak tree, taking a break from the day's work, Nokomis spoke softly. "I have never known life like this," she said. "Everywhere I went before, there was judgment, anger, or cruelty. Here, it is different. I feel safe." Elias looked at her, seeing the truth in her words. "You deserve safety, respect, and happiness," he said. "No one should ever make you feel less than who you are." Her eyes shone with gratitude, and for a moment, the past pain seemed to fade. She realized that life on the ranch, with Elias's steady guidance and care, had given her something she had long thought impossible: a sense of home, a place where she belonged, and a person who truly saw her worth. As the sun set behind the hills, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, Elias and Nokomis sat in quiet companionship. The ranch, the animals, and the wide open land around them seemed to hold a promise of peace and healing. The town and its cruelty felt far away, and the future, though uncertain, seemed brighter than it had in years. And in those quiet, shared moments, a bond was forming, one that would grow stronger with each passing day, built on trust, kindness, and respect. Nokomis had begun to see that life could be more than fear and suffering. And Elias had begun to understand that protecting her, guiding her, and standing by her side was a responsibility he welcomed, one that gave his own life new purpose and meaning. The days on the ranch had grown into a comforting routine, and Nokomis had begun to feel a sense of belonging she had never known. The sun rose over the hills, and she would wake to the sounds of cattle lowing and birds singing. Elias's steady presence was a constant reassurance, and the vastness of the land made the troubles of the town feel distant. Yet, as much as the ranch offered safety, the shadow of the outside world could not be ignored. One morning, as Elias rode toward the nearby creek to inspect a fence, he noticed dust rising in the distance. At first he thought it was the wind stirring the loose soil, but as he drew closer, the shape of a small group of men on horseback became clear. They were from the town, the same men who had once mocked and humiliated Nokomis in the square. Their posture was tense, their eyes sharp with anger, and Elias understood immediately that this was not a casual visit. He guided his horse slowly back toward the ranch house, signaling to Nokomis with a subtle gesture. "Stay inside," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Do not come outside until I say it is safe." Nokomis nodded, a flicker of fear in her eyes. Though she trusted Elias completely, the memory of past cruelty was still fresh, and the presence of the men stirred an old unease she could not easily dismiss. She retreated into the house, closing the door behind her and peering out cautiously through the window. The men approached the ranch gates, their horses kicking up clouds of dust. Elias met them at the entrance, standing tall and unshaken. "You are on private property," he said evenly. "I will not ask again. Leave now." One of the men, a tall and burly figure named Lawson, sneered. "We're just checking on things. Didn't mean no harm," he said, though the edge in his voice suggested otherwise. "But we've heard rumors. That Apache woman is here, living like she owns the place." Elias's eyes narrowed slightly. "Rumors do not give you the right to threaten or harass anyone," he said. "She is under my protection. I will not tolerate disrespect on this land." Lawson laughed, a harsh sound that carried across the yard. "You think a few words from a rich rancher will scare us off? We run that town, Morgan. We decide what happens to people like her." Elias's jaw tightened. He had expected prejudice, perhaps even anger, but this open challenge struck him deeply. "You will leave," he said, his voice rising slightly, but still controlled. "Or you will face consequences. This is not your land, and you will not harm her." The men exchanged uneasy glances. They had underestimated Elias before, but seeing his calm determination, they realized he was not a man to be trifled with. Still, pride and stubbornness held them back, and they muttered threats under their breath as they slowly turned their horses away. Inside the house, Nokomis had been watching silently. Her heart had pounded in her chest as she saw Elias stand firm, protecting her without hesitation. She had known he cared, but seeing him face danger for her sake stirred a deep and unexpected admiration. She realized that this man was unlike anyone she had ever met, someone who not only respected her, but was willing to challenge the world to ensure her safety. The days following the confrontation were quiet, but a subtle tension lingered. Elias continued his routines, checking fences and tending to cattle, but he also kept a watchful eye on the horizon. Nokomis sensed his vigilance and felt both comforted and concerned. She had begun to understand the complexities of the world beyond the ranch. Prejudice, fear, and cruelty but she also understood that Elias's strength could protect them. One afternoon, as they worked together in the garden, Elias spoke softly. "You must understand something, Nokomis," he said. "The world is not always kind, and people often judge what they do not understand. But you are strong, and I will not let anyone harm you." Nokomis looked at him, her eyes reflecting both gratitude and a growing affection. "I know," she said quietly, "and I am not afraid as long as you are here. But what if they come back?" Elias shook his head. "Then we will face them together." Courage is not the absence of fear. It is standing up even when fear is present. Her heart swelled with admiration. These words, simple yet profound, carried a promise of safety and partnership that she had never known before. She realized that her life on the ranch was changing, not just in comfort, but in the possibility of trust, friendship, and perhaps even love. Weeks passed, and life on the ranch continued with a careful balance of work and quiet companionship. Elias and Nokomis grew more comfortable with one another, learning each other's habits, sharing meals, and exchanging small jokes that made them both laugh. Yet, the memory of the townspeople's hostility lingered. One evening, as the sun dipped below the hills, Elias noticed smoke rising in the distance. His instincts immediately went on alert. He mounted his horse and rode toward the source, with Nokomis following closely behind. They arrived to find that a small group of townspeople had gathered near the edge of the property, seemingly preparing to cause trouble. Elias dismounted and walked toward them with calm authority. "This is your final warning," he said. "You are trespassing. Leave now, or I will have no choice but to take action." Lawson stepped forward again, his face red with anger. "You can't tell us what to do, Morgan. This woman is ours, by your town's rules." "We won't let her live here freely." Elias's eyes hardened. "She is not yours. She is a human being, deserving of respect, and I will not let you threaten her or this land. Leave now, or you will regret it." For a tense moment, silence hung in the air, broken only by the low snort of horses. Then, slowly, the men began to retreat, realizing that Elias's calm but unwavering stance left them no room to act. Nokomis watched from a safe distance, her heart racing but filled with gratitude and admiration. That night, as the stars began to appear in the clear sky, Elias and Nokomis sat outside near the fire. She had been quiet since the confrontation, processing the events of the day. Finally, she spoke softly. "You were brave today," she said. "I have never seen anyone stand up like that for me." Elias shook his head gently. "It was not bravery. It was what was right. You deserve to live without fear, and I will do everything in my power to make that happen." Nokomis felt a warmth spread through her chest. These words, coupled with the actions she had witnessed, made her heart swell with a trust she had long denied herself. She realized that she was not alone, that someone truly cared for her well-being, and that together they could face the world. The following days were filled with a cautious peace. Elias continued his routines, keeping a watchful eye on the horizon, while Nokomis began to venture further into the ranch, tending to the garden and helping with the animals. They shared laughter, stories, and quiet moments of companionship, each day deepening the bond that had begun to form between them. Elias noticed subtle changes in Nokomis. She moved with more confidence, spoke with a quieter strength, and allowed herself moments of joy she had once thought impossible. In turn, she noticed changes in him as well, moments of gentle patience, quiet smiles, and a softening of the stern edges he had always carried. One afternoon, as they rested beneath the shade of a large oak tree, Elias turned to her with a thoughtful expression. "Nokomis," he said gently, "you have shown me a strength I have rarely seen. Life has not been easy for you, yet you carry yourself with dignity and courage. It is an honor to know you." Nokomis's eyes filled with emotion. "And you have shown me kindness, safety, and respect," she replied. "I have never known such care. I feel like I can breathe here." Elias smiled softly. "Then, let us continue to protect each other, to stand together. Whatever the future holds, we will face it side by side." As the sun set, casting a golden glow over the ranch, Nokomis and Elias sat in companionable silence. The world beyond the ranch still held challenges and prejudice, but within this space, they had found safety, understanding, and a growing sense of trust. The bond between them, forged through shared experiences and mutual respect, was beginning to take root, promising a future where courage and kindness could overcome fear and cruelty. And so, as night fell and stars twinkled above, Elias and Nokomis understood that they were no longer alone. Together, they could face whatever challenges the world might bring, their hearts strengthened by trust, respect, and the quiet beginnings of a bond that would change both of their lives forever. Life on the ranch had settled into a peaceful rhythm, but Elias and Nokomis both felt the subtle changes in their relationship. The early days of caution and distance had given way to trust and companionship, and now their bond was deepening into something neither had expected. Each morning brought the warmth of routine, the lowing of cattle, the crow of roosters, and the crisp air of the open plains, but also a sense of quiet closeness that had become as comforting as the sunlight on the fields. Nokomis had grown more confident with each passing day. She moved with ease among the animals, tending the garden and helping Elias with small chores around the ranch. Elias often watched her from a distance, admiring the way she handled herself with care and purpose. He noticed the strength in her hands as they worked the soil, the careful precision with which she fed the chickens, and the gentle patience she showed the animals. But what struck him most was the way she had begun to laugh freely, a sound that brought a lightness to the ranch he had not known it needed. One afternoon, after they had finished mending a section of fence together, Elias suggested they take a break. They walked along a shaded path, the sunlight filtering through the tall trees and painting patterns on the ground. Elias handed Nokomis a small cup of cool water. She drank it slowly, her eyes meeting his, and for a moment the world felt as if it had narrowed to just the two of them. "You have settled into ranch life quickly," Elias said with a soft smile. "It suits you." Nokomis chuckled lightly. "I never imagined I could feel at home anywhere again. But here, it feels different. Safe, peaceful." Elias nodded, his gaze thoughtful. "You deserve that peace. And I want to do more than protect you. I want you to live fully, without fear or worry." Her eyes widened slightly at his words. She had grown accustomed to his quiet kindness, his steady presence, and his respect. But this suggestion of a future together was both thrilling and frightening. She had learned to guard her heart, to keep it safe from a world that had caused her so much pain. And yet, the trust she felt for Elias was growing stronger with each day. Over the next few weeks, Elias made small but meaningful gestures that deepened their connection. He showed her how to ride the horses across the wide-open pastures, guiding her hand on the reins and encouraging her to trust herself. He taught her about the ways of the land, the signs of rain and the clouds, the tracks left by deer, and the subtle changes in the soil that hinted at a good harvest. With each lesson, he gave her not only knowledge, but also confidence. Nokomis found herself growing stronger, not just physically, but emotionally, as she realized she could trust herself and Elias to face the world together. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, Elias invited Nokomis to sit with him on the porch of the main house. The air was calm, and the sounds of the ranch, the rustling leaves, the distant lowing of cattle, and the soft chirping of crickets filled the space around them. Elias poured 2 cups of tea, handing one to Nokomis, and they sipped in comfortable silence. "Nokomis," Elias began, his voice gentle but steady, "I have been thinking about your future, about what life could be like, not just here, but for you, without the fear, the judgment, and the cruelty you have faced." She looked at him, curiosity and caution mingling in her eyes. "What do you mean?" she asked softly. "I mean that you should have a life where you are respected, where you are safe, and where you can be happy. Not just here on the ranch, but in the world beyond it if you wish," he said. "I want you to know that you have a choice, and I hope you will allow me to stand by you as a friend and partner, not just as someone who protects you." Nokomis felt a warmth in her chest she had never known. Elias was offering her not pity, not charity, but equality, a partnership built on trust, respect, and care. She realized that this man had not only saved her from harm, but had also opened a door to a life she had long thought impossible. Days passed, and the connection between them deepened. They shared meals, worked together in the fields, and spent quiet evenings talking about hopes and dreams. Elias encouraged Nokomis to explore her own abilities, from learning new farming techniques to experimenting with recipes for meals that would nourish and delight. She, in turn, shared her own knowledge of the land, teaching him about the plants, herbs, and ways of survival she had learned from her people. Their partnership became a dance of mutual learning and respect, each discovering in the other a strength they had not expected. One late afternoon, as they worked together in the orchard, a sudden summer rain began to fall. The soft patter of raindrops on the leaves created a rhythm that seemed almost musical. Elias and Nokomis hurried to take shelter beneath a large oak tree, laughing as they dodged the heavier drops. They huddled together under the wide branches, and for the first time there was a quiet intimacy between them that went beyond friendship. The laughter and shared warmth of that moment created a memory neither would forget. As the rain subsided, Elias looked at Nokomis with a seriousness that made her heart skip a beat. "Nokomis," he said softly, "I have been thinking. Life is too short to wait for the world to accept us. I want you here with me, not just as someone I care for, but as someone I hope to share my life with." Nokomis's eyes widened. Her heart raced as she struggled to find words. The thought of a life with Elias, a life filled with respect, trust, and partnership, was both thrilling and frightening. She had been cautious for so long, yet she could not deny the truth she felt growing inside her. I I never thought such a life was possible," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "But with you, I feel safe. I feel seen." Elias reached out, taking her hand gently in his. "Then let us take that step together," he said. "I cannot promise the world will be kind, but I can promise that we will face it side by side. You will never be alone again." Tears welled in Nokomis's eyes as she felt the depth of his sincerity. For so long she had endured fear, loneliness, and judgment, and now in this moment, she realized that she had found someone who truly valued her, not for pity, but for who she was. The days that followed were filled with careful planning and quiet joy. Elias began preparing the ranch not only for work but for life together. He repaired and expanded the guest rooms, creating a space that would feel like home. Nokomis helped him with small touches, arranging flowers, preparing meals, and organizing the household. Each act was a reflection of their growing bond, a partnership that was becoming stronger with every shared task. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, Elias and Nokomis sat on the porch, watching the colors shift across the sky. The air was warm, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of the orchard and the open fields. Elias turned to Nokomis, his expression tender. "You have changed this place," he said softly. "Not just with your work, but with your spirit. You have brought light and strength where it was needed most." Nokomis smiled, feeling a warmth she had never known. "And you have given me life," she replied. "A life I thought I could never have." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the sounds of the ranch and the distant call of birds settling for the night. The bond between them had grown into something unspoken yet deeply understood, a connection built on trust, respect, and the promise of a shared future. As night fell, stars twinkled in the clear sky, and the ranch was bathed in a soft silver light. Elias and Nokomis knew that challenges still lay ahead. The town and its prejudices were never far away, but for the first time, they felt ready to face the world together. They had found in each other not only protection and care, but a partnership, a sense of belonging, and the beginnings of love that would guide them through whatever came next. And so, under the vast, starry sky, they began to dream of a future together, one filled with safety, respect, and the quiet joy of knowing that they would never have to face life alone again. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright, with sunlight spilling across the rolling hills of the ranch. Birds sang cheerfully, and the gentle breeze carried the scent of wildflowers through the open fields. Elias Morgan and Nokomis stood side by side, preparing to take the next step in their shared life, a step that promised safety, respect, and companionship unlike anything either had experienced before. The ceremony was simple, yet filled with meaning. It took place in the orchard, beneath a tall oak tree whose branches stretched wide, providing shade and a sense of protection. The air was warm but comfortable, and the sounds of nature, rustling leaves, bird song, and the soft murmur of the creek nearby, served as a gentle chorus. Elias had invited only a few trusted friends and ranch hands to witness the union, ensuring that the day remained intimate and peaceful. Nokomis wore a dress of soft, flowing fabric that mirrored the colors of the earth and sky. Her hair was neatly braided, decorated with small wildflowers she had picked that morning. She looked calm yet radiant, the strength and dignity she had carried for so long shining through every movement. Elias wore his best suit, simple but elegant, reflecting both his respect for the occasion and the practical nature of life on the ranch. The ceremony itself was heartfelt and personal. Elias spoke first, his voice steady and sincere. "Nokomis," he began. "From the moment I met you, I have admired your courage, your wisdom, and your strength. You have shown me what it means to trust, to care, and to love. I promise to stand by you, to respect you, and to build a life together where we are equals, partners, and friends. I vow to protect you and to honor you every day of our lives." Nokomis listened carefully, her heart swelling with emotion. She had endured fear, loneliness, and cruelty, yet here she was, standing in a place of peace and security with a man who valued her completely. When it was her turn, she spoke with a quiet strength that carried deep meaning. "Elias, you have given me more than safety. You have given me trust, friendship, and hope. I promise to walk beside you, to share in all the joys and challenges of life, and to honor and respect you as my partner. Together, we will face the world, side by side." The exchange of vows was followed by the simple gesture of joining hands, a symbol of their partnership and mutual respect. Elias and Nokomis smiled at each other. the sunlight catching their eyes, and in that moment, the world seemed to pause. The hardships of the past, the judgment, cruelty, and fear were present only as distant memories, overshadowed by the promise of a future built on trust and love. After the ceremony, the small group of guests shared in a meal prepared with care. The tables were set beneath the shade of the orchard, decorated with wildflowers and simple cloths. Laughter and gentle conversation filled the air, blending with the natural sounds of the ranch. Elias and Nokomis moved among their guests, sharing smiles and quiet words of gratitude. The sense of community and warmth was a stark contrast to the isolation and hostility that had marked much of Nokomis's earlier life. In the days that followed, life on the ranch took on a new rhythm. Elias and Nokomis worked side by side, tending the animals, caring for the garden, and maintaining the land. Each task, whether small or large, became an opportunity to strengthen their partnership and deepen their bond. They learned from each other, respecting each other's knowledge and insight, and celebrated the simple joys of accomplishment together. The town, which had once treated Nokomis with hostility and disdain, began to hear of the marriage. At first, there was murmuring and whispered judgment, but over time, curiosity and respect began to replace fear and prejudice. People came to see that Elias had chosen not out of pity, but out of genuine admiration and love. Slowly, their perception shifted, and Nokomis's courage and dignity became a quiet example to those who had once scorned her. One afternoon, a group of townspeople approached the edge of the ranch not with anger but with cautious respect. They watched from a distance as Elias and Nokomis worked together in the fields, moving with a rhythm that spoke of harmony and mutual understanding. Elias greeted them politely, and Nokomis nodded, her composure steady and confident. The sight of her thriving, respected, and happy challenged the prejudices that had once dominated the town. In private moments, Elias and Nokomis often reflected on how far they had come. One evening, as the sun dipped below the hills, painting the sky in soft shades of pink and gold, they sat together on the porch, hands intertwined. "Do you remember the first day you came to the ranch?" Elias asked gently. Nokomis smiled, a warmth in her eyes. "I was so afraid. I did not know if I could trust anyone again." "You trusted me," Elias said softly, "and that trust has built something stronger than fear." She leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the steady heartbeat of a life she had never thought possible. "And you showed me that life can be kind," she said, "that there can be respect, safety, and even happiness." Their days continued, filled with the routines of ranch life, but also with small moments of joy and tenderness. They would ride together across the fields, watch the sunset over the hills, and share quiet conversations under the stars. The bond they had built was now a foundation for a life that promised companionship, mutual respect, and deep affection. One morning, while checking on the herd, Elias noticed Nokomis smiling at a young foal playing near the fence. Her laughter rang out clear and bright, and he felt a surge of gratitude for the life they were building together. "You have brought light to this ranch," she said softly. "Not just to me, but to everything around you." Nokomis looked at him, her eyes shining. "And you have given me the chance to live fully," she replied. "To trust, to hope, and to dream again." Over time, their story became known in the town, not as one of fear and cruelty, but as one of courage, respect, and love. People began to see that kindness and integrity could triumph over prejudice, and that the bond between Elias and Nokomis was built on equality, not pity. The ranch itself became a symbol of hope, a place where differences were respected and strength of character was valued above all else. As seasons changed, so too did the life they shared. Spring brought new growth to the gardens and the fields. Summer offered long days under the sun. Autumn painted the hills with gold and red. and winter brought crisp air and quiet evenings by the fire. Through it all, Elias and Nokomis worked together, celebrated together, and faced challenges together, each day strengthening the bond that had begun under the shade of the ranch's oak trees. One evening, as snow fell softly across the ranch, Nokomis and Elias sat by the fire, hands clasped, reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. "We have come far," Elias said, his voice filled with quiet pride. "Yes," Nokomis replied, her heart full. "From fear and loneliness to this, peace, trust, and love. I never thought I could have a life like this." Elias smiled, brushing a lock of hair from her face. "And now you do. We will continue to build our life together, facing whatever comes, side by side." Nokomis leaned into him, feeling the steady strength of his presence. For the first time in her life, she felt completely secure, valued, and cherished. She knew that life would not always be easy, but with Elias by her side, she felt capable of facing anything. As the fire crackled and the snow blanketed the ranch in a quiet, peaceful glow, Elias and Nokomis understood that their journey had transformed them both. What had begun as a bond formed through protection and care had blossomed into a partnership of equals, rooted in trust, respect, and love. They had faced prejudice, cruelty, and fear, but together they had built a life that was rich, meaningful, and filled with hope. And so, beneath the vast sky and the watchful stars, Elias and Nokomis began the next chapter of their lives. Not as a protector and the protected, but as partners, friends, and companions. Their marriage was not just a promise of love, but a testament to courage, dignity, and the power of kindness to change lives. The ranch, once a place of work and solitude, had become a home filled with laughter, shared labor, and quiet joy.